and welcome to another video. This is this is episode 48 of the podcast, and let's just get right into it. First up, I would like to talk about the shawl that I have been working on. It's been also about a week since I filmed the last podcast episode, just to give you a bit of a time reference. In any case, I am using a pattern from this book called Makimono. The designer is Yoko Hata, also known as Kasekopo, and I spoke about this book in the last podcast episode, I believe, and also in a autumn 2024 knitting plans video that I made, and I am making this one called Swan. As for the construction and the yarn that I'm using, I can actually already just show you what I've got so far. I'm currently working on the outer edge, but yes, the yarn here, the yarn, it's 100% baby lama. It's from the brand Svarta Fåret, which is a Swedish yarn brand, kind of the budget version of Järbo, I believe. That's kind of how it feels like anyways. But yeah, the yarn itself is called Soft Lama Fine. It is a sport weight yarn, 166 meters per 50 grams, and the color that I'm using has the code 928 Zwarte Bonen, black beans. I don't know if it really comes across like a dark brown, but it is a very, very dark brown. And when I actually bought the yarn, I thought it would be a bit lighter, but in any case, I'm fine with the color. So yes, as for the construction, also I'm using 3mm needles. As for the construction, you start off with a tiny strip of garter stitch. Then once you've finished that, you knit one row, then you knit the side of the strip, so you pick up stitches there, and then you pick up stitches at the bottom, so at the cast on edge. And so you have this tiny rectangle over which you start knitting from left to right, and so it goes from a tiny rectangle to a huge circular scarf. The sides are all garter stitch. You have increases every other row on the side with yarn overs, and the body is for the most part just plain stockinette stitch, but every couple of rows you'll have some garter stitch, which also includes a number of yarn overs, and these create a lace pattern within the shawl, but also function as the means of how it gets increased. So this has been a really fun pattern to knit up, because it is very, I wouldn't say So how do I say this? I like how quite easy it is, but yet there's still some fun with doing the garter stitch and the yarn overs. I do have to say, I did mess up with the yarn overs at some point. I noticed basically every time I had to do the lace increases that I fumbled somewhere 2 or 3 stitches. So I had to correct that a couple of times, but I honestly couldn't be bothered to really figure out where I was messing up, and it seems that I just sometimes did not knit the yarn overs that I created. And one of the reasons as to why I didn't really care too much is because the scarf at some point becomes really, really long, so you have about 300 plus stitches on your needles, and so it was quite a hassle to go back and try and fix or even just find where the problem was. And I figured, since I'm going to be wearing it all around my neck, you're not going to see the full pattern, so you're not going to be able to clock it anyways. So this is actually the back. Here is the front. So I actually just only explained the body of the shawl. It's actually, I'm surprised that it was so big. Actually, I do want to say I kind of got tricked into knitting this pattern. It's kind of silly, but I was just checking out the pattern and I thought basically at the back are all the patterns, and yeah, this is what I saw. And I thought, oh, this seems quite easy. I can fly through this in maybe a day or two, thinking that this was the entire scarf. But then I came to this section right here, which says continues on page 71, which is the next page. Turns out there's this much more to knit. And then here is the section where the edging is explained, which you knit after having knit the entire body. So what I thought would be a 2-day project has turned into a 2-week project instead. So yeah, as I said, I am currently working on the border. I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily struggling at this point, but I'm still trying to figure out the flow of it. So I don't even know how to explain this. For the border, you have to create a frill, and you do this by working some garter stitch and then also some reverse stockinette stitch, and then you also have to do some short rows in order to create the frill. And so there's lots of things happening at the same time, and I'm getting a bit tripped up looking at the diagram, but I just think I need to work a number of stitches, or repeats I should say, and then I think it will be okay. I don't know how well this shows up, but these stitches here are supposed to be garter stitch, and then is this the front? Yeah, this is the front. And then this is supposed to be reverse stockinette stitch, but then in between the reverse stockinette stitch you also have stockinette stitch. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see whether or not I can actually manage to, how would I say this, to memorize this and just do it without having to check the pattern every other row. So there's that, just the frill left. Ideally I will finish this by the end of next week so that I can use it. It's already getting quite cold out here and I only have a tiny hood scarf, so this would be really, really neat. The second scarf from this book that I was planning to knit, the yarn has not come in yet. I spoke about this in my autumn knitting plans video, but the second scarf that I'm going to be working on is called Grid, and it's this lovely garter stockinette stitch scarf that is humongous, and I can't wait to get started on that. Oh, I think it's going to be so cozy. I will be knitting it with Holst Garn's Ttiticaca or Ttiticaca. It's a lake somewhere in South America. And I'm just very excited to also just see all the colors like next to each other IRL, because I've seen them on screen, but actually seeing it in front of me, I think I'm going to really, really like it. Then I'd like to give a small update on the knitting literature that I've been reading. I believe in the last episode I spoke about Knitting Plus, which was a book that I was referred to by another book in order to learn more about making adjustments when it comes to knitting plus sized garments. And I was really excited for that, and I was interested in learning how to make bust dart shaping or bust darts by means of short rows. And I got a hold of the book, which was actually pretty hard. I had to get it secondhand, and finally got to the section where they talk about bust darts. And with regards to short rows, they said, read this other book. Yep. So I was very hesitant trying to get a hold of this book because I thought, okay, what if they're going to refer me to another book? But I did some research and I actually found out that it was available, or still is actually available, on the Internet Archive. The only thing you need is a free account, and then you can borrow the book for about an hour. And this hour extends if you are just continuously reading the book. So I'll leave a link to that in the description box below. And I'm very, very thankful that it was available there, because I think I would have been quite disappointed if I purchased the book, because in all honesty, I think about 4 or 5 pages were interesting to me, because that's about as much information you get in terms of accommodating a larger bust. And the rest is just knitting patterns and some other things, such as what to wear or what not to wear when you have certain types of body shapes. The book is quite outdated, I should say. I forgot to mention the authors actually. It was written by Gillian Moreno and Amy R. Singer, and it came out back in 2006. And a lot of it is quite dated, I should say. The writing style screams 2000, early 2000s. For instance, I wrote this one down, and there was this one section where they said that you should get a good bra in order to let your girls sit up and bark. Oh, yeah. So there's that. It was a funny read, though, I should say, but in the end, I got the information that I wanted, wrote it down so that I can reference it in the future. So that's all for big girl knits. Then I have an update on the Rosemond blouse from Jack Frost, Blouse Book Volume 28 from 1938. The yarn that I'm using, here it is. This is... Tell me that you like the color green without telling me you like the color green. So, yes, the yarn that I'm using is some isager tweed that I have owned for quite some time. I had actually planned to use this for another project, but it is 70% wool, 30% mohair. It's fingering weight 200 meters per 50 grams, and the color I am knitting this in is bottle green. Yep. So as for needles, I'm using 3mm needles for the body and then 2.5mm for the ribbing. The construction is pretty vintage. It's knit flat. You start at the back, do some ribbing, increase evenly on the first stockinette stitch row. You knit all the way up, you start casting off and decreasing stitches, and then once you get to the shoulder, you do shoulder shaping by casting off, but I exchanged that for Japanese short rows. The front is pretty similar. There are more stitches at the front. I don't know exactly why that is, but maybe for the puff, probably it would look a bit more yeah, so there's a bit of a puff at the bottom because you do increase a number of stitches at the bottom, and I think that you wouldn't want as much puff at the back as the front. In any case, you do that, and you also have a pocket right here. I forget the original construction, but I actually knit the pocket beforehand, put it on live stitches, and then once I got to this section here, I put the stitches of the front on hold, then started knitting with the pocket stitches all the way up, did some shaping for the neck and for the shoulders in the same way as the back, and then came back to actually sew in the pocket. I didn't do a great job, I will be honest. This is the first time that I've had to do something like this. I should actually take it off the hanger to show you. Yeah, here's the pocket. Especially this section here is not the neatest, but I figured out a method or a way to make this a bit easier, because on reverse stockinette stitch it's quite hard to recognize all the bumps that go in the same row. No, not in the same row, but in the same column. So what I ended up doing, the right side I just kind of winged it, or I should say the left side. The left side here I kind of winged it, but then the right side, what I did was at the front here, I took some white yarn and I just put it through the column at the front, which is quite clear to see, and then I could use that as a guide on the back. So that's what I did. I just whip stitched it. I have loads and loads of loose ends everywhere because I made mistakes and I had to redo a number of things. In the last episode, I spoke about how I took out a number of rows at the front. I didn't really remember my reasoning, but what ended up happening was that the front got too short and the shoulder seams were not sitting quite right, and thus also the neck was pretty high up there. So what I ended up doing was I took the 3 needle bind off that I used for the seams at the shoulders, I took them all out. I then put the back stitches, the live stitches on hold, and then I ripped out a section and then I re-knitted. And yeah, now it seems to be fitting quite fine. Very, very happy about that. And so I do have to say it was a struggle because I was just not in the right mindset when I was knitting this up, and so trying to fix it. So the first shoulder I think went quite well. The second shoulder I took out the 3 needle bind off and then put it back in without adding the rows. Then the second time I did it, I actually knit the rows, but I put a twist in the shoulder. And then the third time I actually did fix it in the right way. And yeah, I was very happy about that. Also, adding 6 rows at the sides meant that there was more space for the ribbing, and that made it so that I could just use an Italian bind off without too much of a struggle to fit it over my head. It's just 1 by 1 rib on the top. And so now the only thing that's left to do is actually just the sleeves. And the way this is done is that you pick up a number of stitches at the top here, and then every row you pick up more stitches, and that's kind of how you do the sleeve shaping. And then once you've gone kind of full circle. The pattern tells you to knit flat and then seam the underarms once you're done with the sleeve. And then, yeah, there's nothing really else to it. This is actually quite cropped. I thought I was reading the instructions correctly, but basically, before getting to the underarms, it said knit a number of inches from ribbing. And for some reason, I thought they meant from the bottom of the ribbing. But now that I think of it, they would have said knit so and so inches from cast on edge. So I am missing, I don't know, 7 centimeters of body. And so it is quite, how would I say it? It is quite cropped, but that's not too much of an issue. I have quite a short torso anyway, so I do think I can get away with this, especially if I wear this with a high-waisted skirt, of which I don't have many, but hopefully in the future I can knit and sew up a couple of those. And yeah, that's something I'm definitely going to remember next time. So I am very happy with this. I think I'm going to reknit this again in another color. And also, last time I mentioned that I dropped a number of stitches on the side. I dropped 2 stitches on the left side. No, yeah, the left side. And I was quite bothered by that. And I was thinking of a solution on how to prevent that from happening. And I came up with the idea of using a stitch marker. So putting a stitch marker 1 stitch after the edge stitch, so that you always know at least that you're not dropping any stitches on the sides. So that's something I think I'm going to implement. And I think that's everything I had to say for this one at the moment. I think I'm also might use this as just simply a layering piece in the winter. So there's that. Then I want to talk about a project that I started quite a long time ago, a couple of months, probably I started this in April, I think. So it's from a Japanese magazine that just disappeared a couple of days ago, which is very unfortunate. I have to look for it, but I have no idea where it might be. But it is definitely in my home. So it's the vintage 15-year-old girl ski set from this book called Shujin Seikatsu. It was a special supplement of this woman's magazine, and this one came out in December of 1951, also known as Showa 26. Now it consists of a sweater, mittens, and hats. So this is the back, the first time that I tried it out. I am using Drops Karisma, which is a DK weight / worsted weight yarn, 100% wool, 100 meters per 50 grams. This color up here is donkerpaars, dark purple, number 76. And this one is lavendel, number 74, lavender. Let me first tell you about the construction and the struggles that I've been dealing with. It's been quite a time since I first started working on it, and so I have forgotten a couple of things, and I have learned quite a lot of things as well, and so I have better insight when it comes to this pattern now, and it's making me consider a couple of things. But as for the construction, the sweater is knit flat in pieces. You do the back, you start with 2 by 2 ribbing, then you increase a number of stitches, and as you do that, once you've reached 6 centimeters, you start working intage from the center all the way out, and then once you hit the arm whole section, you do some armhole shaping, and then you knit all the way up. So you do the front in a similar way. The only difference is that you do some neck shaping as well, or some deeper neck shaping. There is actually some neck shaping at the back as well. You're supposed to, I see in the original you're supposed to cast off your shoulders without doing any shoulder shaping. I did add some shoulder shaping, but I think I might take that out and just try and see how it looks just based off of the original. So once you've done that, you start working on the sleeves, 2x2 rib. You do essentially the same as this. You knit all the way up, and then once you've done that, you seam one shoulder and then you seam the sleeves, and then you pick up stitches around the neck, leaving one side open. I believe you do 2x2 rib at the neck, and you do that in the main darker color. Then you take the lighter color, do some more ribbing, and then you fold it outwards, which is interesting because I've never seen that being done before. And then you attach it to the bottom of the neck edge. And there was something that said, I don't know there was a term that said that was mijikai, or just the symbol for, or the character for short, and then dan, the character for row. And I was confused about that, because how the heck are you supposed to do a short row when you're supposed to attach the collar to the bottom? And I was really confused about that. I googled it, I chat GPT'd it. Everyone was saying short rows, and then I don't know what I did, but I typed it in, and then I somehow got referenced to older Japanese knitting books and crochet books. And what I found is, eventually I found that it was the old term for single crochet. Now the new term is something else, I don't quite remember, but it's not short row anymore. So what they were referencing was, or what they were trying to say is that you fold the collar and then you single crochet around to attach it to the bottom. And that makes so much sense, because there was a kind of a braid drawn on the pattern around the neck, and I was really confused by that. But that's just essentially the top of the single crochet that they were trying to show. And I was really, really proud of myself that I didn't give up and that I actually figured out what it meant. I wanted to pat myself on the back after that one. In any case, you also do some single crochet on the sides here, and that leaves space for a zipper so that you can zip it up. So that's the sweater. Then moving on to the hat, you have your hat situation, ear flaps with tassels, and then a pom-pom on top. So the way you do this is that you cast on a number of stitches in the round, and then you start knitting in 1x1 rib, and then you increase going to 2x1 rib, and then you increase again, I believe going to 2x2 rib, something like that. So you keep increasing, and then once you've finished increasing, you knit a couple of rows straight, then you decrease again to give it this shape, and then you knit a couple of rows straight again, and then you fold in the hem, and then you move on to the ear flaps. You cast on a number of stitches, knit up straight, then start decreasing for the bottom. Then I believe you crochet on the inside, so you I am not too sure how this is actually done, but I had another idea anyway, so I wasn't planning on doing this. But you crochet a number of stitches, and I believe you then fold it and then whip stitch it together, and then you add tassels and then the pom-pom. So that's that. And then the mittens, I believe, are gauntlet mittens. You start by 2 by 6 ribbing. Yeah, so 2 knits, 6 purls, and then after a number of stitches or centimeters, you decrease to 2 by 5, then 2 by 4, until you are at 2.2, or no, 2 by 2, and then you knit up the mitten. It's pretty straightforward. You just knit up and increase for the thumb section, and then you put those stitches on hold, you knit straight, decrease, and then at some point you pull the stitches, the thread through the stitches, and then you close it in. So this is my first attempt. This is the first thing that I knit after knitting this a couple of months ago, and the mitten, as you can see, is a bit too big. There is a good 2 centimeters, I would say, of extra fabric on the side. The issue that I've found is that I don't think I have the correct weight of yarn, if that makes any sense. The information with regards to the yarn as well as the gauge was almost non-existent. In terms of materials, they said use thick yarn. And then at the section of gauge, it says 10. 10 what? 10 stitches, 10 centimeters. I think there was actually a printing error, because on other patterns, if I remember correctly in that book, the gauge was specified. In any case, the only way that I could actually figure out the gauge was going through the pattern and then looking at sections, because that's also kind of the issue. Either they wrote down things in centimeters and didn't give the amount of rows that you should knit, and other times they would give you the amount of stitches but wouldn't give the width in centimeters. So it was quite hard figuring that out. At least for the larger needles that are for the body of this, I figured out that it was 24 stitches, yes, per 10 centimeters. Height, I have no flippin' no flippin' idea, and that's kind of an issue with this one right here, because I didn't know what I had. I had no idea. Also, these were all supposed to be knit on smaller needles, so the bottom and the top are both knit on smaller needles. And actually, to be honest, now the more that I'm wearing it, the more I think that it's actually not as bad as I had imagined. I was just really frustrated with how this eventually worked up. Just loads and loads of things that I had to take into account, and just a lot of time concentrating trying to figure things out, because like I said, this was knit on smaller needles, but the gauge was never given for smaller needles anywhere, and so the only thing I knew was the length this piece was supposed to be, but not the width. And so I was kind of winging it, and I ended up with larger mittens than I had actually want to have. And there was this section at the top. Sorry for going on such a tangent with this, but there was here, this small section was with the contrast color, right? And so they tell you to decrease every other row 7 times, which means obviously that you need 14 centimeters. No, 14 rows. That you need 14 rows, right? Because 7 times decreasing at the 4 points here, every other row, 14 rows, right? And then they give the height of this to be 3 centimeters. So if you calculate that, right, 14 divided by 3 times 10, that's, I think, somewhere 40 plus rows per 10 centimeters, which makes no sense, because how small, how are you supposed to knit with thick yarn on, I think, 2.5 or 3 millimeter needles and get such a fine gauge? It just did not make any sense to me whatsoever. So I could only reduce a few stitches actually, but I think maybe I should just, and so there's this huge hole here, but I was just thinking of maybe doing this next time and then fixing it with some Kitchener stitch, but the stitch count that is also used for the body is uneven, which is also very annoying because you can't use that for Kitchener's stitch. Whew, I need a small break. Looking back, I don't think I was really knowledgeable enough to make this entire project a success when I first started it. I was also very messy when it came to actually translating this pattern, and so I took the time to completely transcribe it. Well, not transcribe it directly from in Japanese. I ended up writing the pattern in modern ways right here. So I have the sweater here, the mittens here, and as you can see, I've been writing on it because it's been a struggle. And then I have the hat here as well. And so now I have everything kind of clear. I want to actually do another gauge swatch with this yarn because I do think my tension has changed, and I guess I could call this a big gauge swatch for knitting in the round. So I just need to do one flat and then just see how I can convert this to a different gauge, because I have tried to get to 24 stitches per 10 centimeters with this yarn, but it is impossible. I started knitting on, I think, 2.5 millimeter needles when I restarted another mitten and I tried it with 2.5 and it was hurting my hands. So I just can't get anything finer than 20 stitches. So I'm just going to have to try and convert this and just see where it ends up. I don't think I'm going to be using this back piece, also because the armholes are just so wide. Because the thing is that the pattern actually is, like the title says, it's for a 15-year-old girl, and the full bust measurement of the sweater is 84 centimeters. So that means that that's about 1 or 2 centimeters of positive ease for me. And at the time when I was working on the sweater, I wasn't too familiar with positive and negative ease in the sense of how it would work on my body. And as I was looking at the picture of the pattern of the girl actually wearing it, I think I was focusing a lot on the sleeves because the sleeves were quite loose. But if I look closely, there isn't all that much of positive ease at the chest. So I think that actually 2, maybe 3 centimeters of positive ease would actually look quite nice with this sweater. So I was first thinking of sizing it up, but I think I'm going to actually go pretty close with the measurements of the original one. So yeah, I think the next step is just actually changing the gauge of the pattern and then knitting it up. What I like to do now is print out the pattern and then make my adjustments on paper and then transfer it again to a new document and then make it into a next version, if that makes any sense. So that's what I have in terms of the vintage Japanese stuff. Then I would like to get back to the Isager archives collection. I've taken some time away from the Johanne loop sweater, and yesterday actually felt that I could kind of look at it now and see if I could retry this pattern. In the previous podcast episodes, I spoke about using 100% alpaca to knit up this sweater in sport weight when the original one was DK, and I figured that it actually wouldn't work out for me. And so in the end, I decided on some Ístex's plötulopi. Is that how you call it? Yeah, plötulopi. I am using two colors. This one at the bottom is chocolate heather 1032 and the top is dark amber heather 1426. This is a color combination that I saw on Ravelry. I thought it would look quite nice. This is the first time that I'm working with unspun woolen yarn. It's 100% wool. Oh yeah, the yardage is 150 meters per 50 grams. It's sport weight, and yes, the experience has been interesting. I really like to take yarn from the center, and what I learned from doing research is that you shouldn't be doing that with unspun yarn because it's so fragile. You actually have to take some yarn from around the plate and then knit it like that, because otherwise it keeps snapping. And yeah, the first experience knitting with this was kind of rough, but I think I'm getting the hang of it now. But on the website of Ístex, it says that it gives the gauge for if you hold the yarn double, but not for one single strand. It says that the gauge depends on the needle that you use. And I looked on Ravelry and there were people that got a gauge of 24 stitches with this yarn, and girl, I don't know how anyone managed to do that, because I can't get below 20 stitches. Or more. I can't fit more than 20 stitches into 10 centimeters. It just doesn't work for me. I knit this with 3 millimeter needles, 20 stitches. The thing is, because I also don't want to knit it tight because it just breaks so easily, I have to knit it very loose, and so I just can't go lower than that. And the funny thing about this is, right, it's a sport weight yarn, and so the gauge that I have is 20 stitches, and the Johanne loop sweater is DK weight, and it has a stitch count of 22 stitches. Now, here is where my problem starts, okay? So the smallest size of that sweater has a bust circumference of 108, and they recommend positive ease of 20 to 30 centimeters. I like to not have all that much positive ease because I am short of stature, and so very oversized things can quite quickly make me look infant, like child, like so to speak, wearing adult clothes. So I try to lean more towards fitted things, even though it's oversized, if that makes any sense. So the thing is, with the pattern, following the pattern straight, I can't get anything smaller than 25 centimeters of positive ease. So that means that I need to modify it. But on top of that, my gauge is also bigger than the gauge of the pattern. So that means that I have to first convert the I have to convert the sweater to my gauge and then shrink it. So I have to do two different things, and I was just so frustrated. And then at some point, when it was quite late at night, I thought, you know what? Maybe, just maybe, because the thing is also, and I spoke about this in my pet peeves pattern video, when there's only the bust circumference, and so you have to go through the pattern to, I don't know, for instance, calculate the armhole depth, things like that. I really don't like having to do that, but I decided last night to just slowly and thoroughly look at the pattern and then just rewrite it so that it would be with a larger gauge and smaller. And so I think I have managed to modify it to a sweater with a bust circumference of about 99 centimeters and an armhole about 20 centimeters, I think. So with 99 centimeters, that gives me 16 centimeters of positive ease, which I think would work for me. So yes. So let me tell you what I did, kind of a bird's view of how I went about modifying this pattern. The sweater is a pretty straightforward drop shoulder sweater with some short row shaping at the back and at the sleeves and some armhole shaping as well. And so I thought, let me just start at the easiest section, and that was the body. Now the pattern does have a motif, and so I had to look at the stitch counts for every section of the motif, and so I had to look at what number of stitches I can take out of the pattern without disrupting the sequence. So I calculated that, and I calculated a different number of modifications until I got to the point where I had a stitch count that made sense, and also body circumference that was in line with 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 my body essentially, and the stitch count, or the my own gauge. And I found that and ended up with 47.5 centimeters for the front as well as for the back, i.e. 99 centimeters. And so I reduced the circumference by 9 centimeters. Then I did keep the same amount of armhole decreases because, there's not that much of a difference between, how should I say this? Yeah, there's not that much of a difference between 22 and 20 stitches. And so the change in stitches going from a different gauge with a small amount of stitches is small. So I decided to keep that. Then I calculated the neck hole width because I looked at the model and decided that I was fine with keeping the neck hole width, because what I really wanted to do, right, is take off parts from the side, and I didn't want to mess with anything around the neck. And so the only thing I needed to do there was just change the gauge. So I changed the gauge of the neck hole, calculated how many stitches it was, then subtracted it from the full length and divided that by 2 in order to get the sleeves. And so in that way I keep the neck hole the same but have less stitches on the sides. And so then I had to kind of figure out how the short rows were done. I figured that out, then applied it to the new stitch count of the sleeves, And I had to also take into account, of course, the height of the short rows, because I did actually want to keep that the same. And so I calculated how many short rows I could do in that same height section, and that worked out quite well. And then I looked at the sleeves, decided I didn't want to do any short row shaping there, and just knit it straight. If I didn't like it, I can always just come back and knit it with short rows. So there is that. Yeah. So that's kind of my game plan for this. I'm very happy that I at least am giving this another try, because I was actually already looking how I could repurpose this yarn for another Isager Archives collection sweater. And I'm just happy that I kind of pulled through this hard section. So I've rewritten it, and then hopefully I can make a start maybe this week or next week. And that's basically everything in terms of knitting. I still want to talk a bit about sewing, because as you can see, the shirt is finally complete. I'm so happy. The buttons came in a couple of days ago. I can show you actually the ones that I used for this shirt. I had shiny plastic ones at first, but they seemed a bit too big for the buttonholes that I made. And yeah, I eventually settled with this one. These are some vintage buttons. I mean, the card is so dang old, but yeah, they worked excellently. I don't know if you can see it all that well, but yeah, I put them on. I still had to add buttonholes at the sleeves here, so I did that yesterday. And remember how I had an issue with the buttonhole here, that I put it far too much to the side? Well, I ended up just extending the buttonhole, and now it looks pretty decent, I think. And I think I'm just going to wear it like this. The shirt is quite oversized, and it doesn't really look all that nice tucked in. I think that's also because of the material. It's not the lightest cotton, and it doesn't have a lot of drape, so to speak. I don't know if that's just generally also with cotton. What do I know? I don't really sew that much. But yeah, it's just a bit too big to look nice tucked in, as you can see here. Oh, you can also see the buttons here as well. So this is, I think, the way I'm going to be wearing it. I am very surprised with how the puffs eventually kind of came out after I had put in the buttons here. I'm really happy with how it looks. I might make another one, but I still have a good number of shirts that I would like to work on first. I bought this other book online, and I think it's a Japanese book called Dress Shirts, and you can actually print out the pattern pieces, which is really nice, because tracing is to be able to avoid the step of tracing is great. I also just realized that I forgot to show you the book again from which I got this pattern. It's a Japanese pattern. It's called Amai Fuku, so Sweet Clothes, by Asuka Hamada. And it's this one right here that I made. This one is quite similar, but the collar is a bit different. In terms of patterns in this book, I think I'm not going to make all that many anytime soon, just because the pieces are so oversized, and I'm actually looking for something with a tighter fit. So, yep, I'm very happy with this project. This is my first actual shirt, and I am really looking forward to getting better and learning more about construction in terms of sewing. Now, I did recently actually a couple of months ago, get my hands on a vintage sewing pattern from the 1950s from Germany. I have it right here. It's called Der Neue Schnitt. This one is from 1957, and there was this shirt that I was really interested in making, and I think this is the wrong volume. Okay, I can't find it, but I think I'll leave that for another episode. But yeah, I've traced everything out and I cut out a mock-up, and that's when I realized that the pattern does not contain any notches or much instructions. So I'm just going to have to figure that out on my own. It is fun that I have a mock-up to work and play with. That helped me a lot with this shirt as well, because otherwise I would have made way more mistakes than I did this time around. So I'm very happy about that. Another thing that I would like to talk about, and I think this is actually the last piece. It's a bag I have been working on, and I cut the pattern pieces out a couple of months ago. This is the first thing I ever cut out, and I failed miserably. So yeah, I'd like to talk about that for a second. I think the pattern is called Taku Poketo Bag, so tuck pocket bag. And it's a free pattern from Koka. It's also the brand of this yarn. Is it here? Yes. It's from Japan, 100% cotton. I got this as a gift from my sister. She gave me a gift card, so I got to decide what I wanted to get. But yeah, this is how far I basically got. It's a cute bag, right? So the thing is that I, for some reason, cut out the outside bag portion too short, and so now I don't have enough fabric for tucks, which is really annoying. I don't know how I managed to do it, and I can't completely get a new strip of yarn, a new strip of cloth to redo this section, because it was actually the biggest section of the cloth. So what I think I'm going to do is make some type of patchwork, which I think lends itself actually quite well to this pattern, since it does have all these different colors. What I'm going to have to do is I'm going to take out the zigzag stitch here, take out the folded hem here as well, and just add a section here. And then I think it should work. I think it would actually look quite fun. I still have quite a bit left of the fabric, so I have enough to just cut a strip and add it to it. So I think that's going to work out. I just need to find a day where I am concentrated, peaceful, and all around just in the good mindset to start working on this. And then I think it'll be okay. And I think I'm going to leave it at that for this episode. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon in another video. Bye bye!